What up, everybody? This is Mr. View, and the Tiger King is going to help me out with this lecture today. This is a little heavier lecture. It's about Adolf Hitler and the start of Germany's war machine. But I want to touch on what we've learned about the last couple of days. Remember, we started off with Italy and why they were unhappy after World War One. Remember, they were on the winning side, but they didn't get as much land as they thought, so they were upset about it. And so that guy Mussolini was able to gain power. He was very nationalistic. They had intense pride in their country. He was also very totalitarian, which meant they wanted total control of Italy. And so his fascist party had total control, right? They censored things. They used propaganda. They jailed critics or killed people. They used spies and terror and all these types of things to control the country. They also went after the youth and kind of brainwashed them, right? And they said that women should win the battle of motherhood. And if they got 14 kids, they had 14 kids, Il Duce, Mussolini, would give them a medal himself. So Italy started to get a little more imperialistic. Mussolini promised to turn the Mediterranean into an Italian lake. So they were going to try to expand. Japan, we learned about them yesterday, and they were very militaristic, right? They had a deep depression after World War One, and they had this big earthquake, 8.3 on the Richter scale, and killed a lot of people, right? And destroyed a ton of buildings. 700,000 buildings were destroyed. It slung them into a huge depression also, and the militarists gained control of the country, and they wanted to expand, and they're imperialistic as a result, right? Imperialism means to expand your country and take over others. But they wanted to get into China and Manchuria. So what they did is they sabotaged their railroad tracks. They blew up one of their own railroad tracks, blamed it on China, and bam, punched China in the mouth as a result. And they started attacking them and taking them over a little bit. So we get the feelings of these two being on the wrong side of World War II, which they are. But the big heavy, right, the big bad in this whole equation is Germany. And you know a little bit about them, right? You throughout your history classes. But today we're going to touch on a little bit more. So Germany, they really hated that Treaty of Versailles. Remember, you read that Treaty of Versailles document, and you saw that it was really harsh on Germany, who these countries thought really was at fault for the war. Germany had to take blame for that war, even though it's not them that declared it first. They did the first real action, right? They marched through Belgium and attacked Vive la France. And so they were pretty much blamed for the war. Afterwards, they had to pay reparations or payments for war damages. They had to pay all these other countries for getting beat up, really, right? They had to pay France and England and all these countries these reparations. $30 billion. So that's a lot of money that they had to pay out, which they did not have. They also lost their land and lost some colonies. So they lost a bunch of their land, they lost a bunch of their colonies. And we know the colonies are great for income, right? You sell stuff to them, you buy their stuff at your prices. And so you really control a different place, and it's an influx of money. They also had their military limited. The countries that won World War One, they didn't want Germany to get this military powerhouse back. They didn't want to rearm. So they said, you can only have X amount of soldiers or X amount of this or X amount of that. So that really limited Germany's military, and that military does employ people, right? So those people lost jobs as a result too. They blame the Jews widely throughout Germany for this Treaty of Versailles, and that stems some of that hatred, that anti-Semitism that we know happened in Germany throughout World War II, but very much prior to. They had huge debts, and their land was destroyed. Right? Not only were they the losers of World War One, but tons of stuff was destroyed. Their factories, their road system, railroads, churches, schools, you name it. It was pretty much destroyed in Germany. They got beat up a lot, and they lost a ton of soldiers. Huge inflation hits, right? They say everybody's poor in Germany. Let's print a bunch of money. Bad idea. So the German politicians, they say, yeah, let's do this. Let's print all this money, which they do. That creates a huge inflation, right? And now the dollar is worth nothing in Germany. Something that cost 100 marks 1 year cost 944,000 the next. because people were just printing money. It was worthless. People were actually burning money because it was worth more as fuel for fire than it was at the store for bread. You'd see people, there are pictures of people with wheelbarrows full of money bringing it to the store just to buy some bread. So this huge inflation hits, and it's awful for Germany. And a lot of people are unemployed. We think our Great Depression in America was bad, and it was, but it wasn't as bad as it was in Germany. Germany actually had over 30% unemployment. That's a crazy number. We didn't hit 30% unemployment in America. We had more like 25 was our high point. But this is right before Hitler is able to gain power. When you have that much debt and you have people starving and no people have jobs, things are going to change. We've talked about that before, right? When the people get upset and there's a bulk of the population that are unhappy in Germany, things are going to change. And not all those changes are good, right? So this terrible depression strikes Germany, and now we're kind of introduced to Adolf Hitler. He wasn't actually born in Germany. He was born in Austria, right? Austria-Hungary, remember them from World War I? They were the guys with the Archduke who was assassinated, and Germany was their big ally. Adolf Hitler moves to Germany, fights for Germany in World War I. After the war, he joins the National Socialist. What is that? National Socialist. You've heard that word before, right? Democratic Socialist and Merkel. Well, these are the National Socialists in Germany. Not the same thing. The National Socialists, they're the Nazi Party. In 1923, this thing happens. It's called the Beer Hall Putsch. And in this, Hitler stands on this table, fires his revolver, bam, bam, and he says, "The revolution has begun." But it hadn't yet. And so he was thrown in jail. He only served less than a year. But while he was in jail, he wrote a very, very important book. It's called Mein Kampf. English, My Struggle, right? And he talks about his struggle with what's happened with Germany and things like that. And it's very anti-Semitic. It expresses extreme nationalism or pride for his country of Germany. And he says that they should expand, be imperialistic. He basically outlines what he's going to do for Germany when he gets power. And he says, I'm going to do this, this, and this. We should not have been surprised. The world should not have been surprised when he gets out of jail and he actually starts doing it. He says that he's going to end reparations. I'm not going to pay these countries any more of our money. I'm going to end unemployment. And we are going to rearm Germany and make it the strongest country in the world. And so he gets out of jail and he starts to do this stuff. People start to listen to him. He becomes this big member of the Nazi Party, and eventually he's made chancellor in 1933 of Germany. And guess what? He does these things. He promises to end reparations. He does it. He stops paying these other countries. He says he's going to create jobs. He almost ends unemployment by 1938. It's down to about 2%. While the rest of the world is kind of in this depression still, he's ending things in Germany. And he definitely rearms them. He makes their army big and strong and everything else. And the rest of the world, even though he's supposed to be, not rearming and paying reparations and all this stuff, they don't do anything about it. They slap him on the wrist. They tell him not to do stuff. And he doesn't listen. He doesn't care. But the League of Nations has no bite with their bark, and so he doesn't care. All right? So just to reiterate what we've talked about today. Today we learned about Germany and how they hated the Treaty of Versailles because of the reparations, the limiting the military and losing land and colonies. They were thrown into this big depression. They had huge inflation. Money was worthless. They had a really, really high unemployment. And the land was pretty much destroyed by World War I. So they turned to wherever they could turn, and in steps Adolf Hitler, who was born in Austria, fought for Germany during World War I. He gets thrown in jail after the Beer Hall Putsch. He writes his famous book, Mein Kampf, or My Struggle, which outlines what he's going to do to the rest of the world and how he's going to make Germany this huge power. His Nazi Party membership grew. He promises to end reparations, create jobs, and rearm, which he does. And that's today's lecture. See you tomorrow.